You were told to wait your turn. You were told good things come to people who are patient. Your parents told you that if you worked hard and stayed loyal to one company, you would be taken care of. Your teachers told you that a steady job was the safe path, and that dreaming too big was a good way to get hurt. Your friends told you not to rock the boat, because comfortable was better than sorry. Even the government, in its own quiet way, built a whole system around the idea that you should trade 40 years of your life for a small check at the end. None of these people were lying to you on purpose. They loved you. They wanted you safe. But safe and free are not the same thing, and somewhere between their good intentions and your actual life, a very different set of rules got left out. Rules that Jim Rohn spent his whole life trying to hand people, for free, in small rooms, to anyone willing to listen. Here is what nobody tells you at the dinner table. There are two sets of rules in this world. There is the set the public is taught, and there is the set the few actually practice. The public set says, get a degree, get a job, get a raise, retire someday. The few set says something else entirely, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Jim Rohn used to say that formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune. That single line is the crack in the wall. Walk through it with me. Emphasis. Some of what I am about to say will contradict what you were told growing up. If you cannot handle finding out that people who love you were simply repeating what was handed to them, without ever checking if it was true, then this video is not for you. Turn it off now. But if you are the kind of person who would rather know the truth and feel a little uncomfortable than stay comfortable and stay broke, then stay with me, because we have work to do.
Not 10 rules, not 3, 6. Exactly 6 pillars hold up every ordinary person who has quietly built real wealth without ever becoming famous for it. 6 is not a round marketing number. 6 is the number of decisions that, when stacked, physically change the shape of a life. Any fewer and the structure collapses under pressure. Any more and you dilute your focus so thin that nothing gets built. I have watched this pattern in small back offices of family businesses in Dayton, in a barbershop in Tulsa, in a 2-bedroom apartment above a grocery store in Fresno. Different zip codes, same 6 pillars every time. Pillar 1 is called the spread. Years ago, before any of this made sense to me, I was handed my first paycheck and I did what everyone does. I looked at the number and I spent up to it. New shoes, a nicer phone plan, a car payment I could technically afford. Nobody warned me that the space between what you earn and what you keep is the only space wealth can grow in. If that space is 0, it does not matter how much you make. Let me tell you about a person. A janitor in a mid-sized hospital in Ohio worked the night shift for 38 years. Nobody in that building knew his last name outside of payroll. He earned modest wages his whole career, nothing close to 6 figures. But he kept the same small apartment for 3 decades, drove cars until they died, and never once let his spending rise with his raises. When he passed, his estate was worth just over $8 million. Almost entirely because he fed the gap between his income and his living every single month into simple, steady investments. Here is the math, because the math is the only honest teacher in this room. If you save just $400 a month and it grows at an average 8% a year, in 30 years that is not $144,000, the amount you put in. It is closer to $590,000 because growth compounds on top of growth. The gap is the seed. Compounding is the soil and the sun. Notice that a river does not need to be wide to carve a canyon. It only needs time and consistency. Pillar 2 is called the soldier test. When I was younger, I believed a job was where you went to get paid. I clocked in, did what was asked, and clocked out, and I felt no need to do more than that because more was not on the paycheck. It took me years to understand that I was actually failing what Jim Rohn called the soldier test, the quiet standard the few hold themselves to before anyone is watching. Let me tell you about another person. In a small manufacturing town outside Charlotte, there was a woman who worked the front desk of a plumbing supply company. She was not the owner, she was not even a manager. But she treated every phone call, every order, every small task as if the business were her own for 11 straight years, long before anyone offered her a raise for it. Eventually, the owner, preparing to retire, sold her a piece of the company at a steep discount because he trusted no one else to run it the way she already had been running it in her head the whole time. Here is the math behind why this works. A person who does the bare minimum increases their value to an employer by roughly 0% a year. A person who consistently does more than asked compounds their value, and value compounds the same way money does, quietly then suddenly. Bamboo spends its first 4 years growing roots you cannot see, and then it shoots up 90 feet in 6 weeks. The soldier test is root work. Nobody applauds it. It is still the thing that decides who gets handed the keys later. Pillar 3 is called the compounding decade. I used to think that starting late meant it was already too late. I was in my late 20s before I put a single dollar into any kind of investment account, and I remember feeling like the window had already closed on me. It had not. Let me tell you about a third person. A man arrived in this country in his 30s with limited English and almost no savings. He took a job stocking shelves at a small grocery store 6 days a week and spent his evenings learning the business from the inside, watching how inventory moved, how margins worked, how customers behaved. By age 48, he owned 4 small grocery stores of his own across 2 counties. His decade of stocking shelves was not wasted time. It was the compounding decade, the unglamorous stretch where the skill and the capital quietly built up underneath a life that, from the outside, looked unchanged. Here is the math. If you invest $10,000 once and let it sit for 20 years at 8%, it grows to about $46,000. But if you wait 10 years to start, that same $10,000 only grows to about $21,600 in the remaining 10 years. The first decade is worth more than the second decade, dollar for dollar, every single time Beck. Saws it has more years left to compound behind it. A tree planted today shades a person 20 years from now. A tree planted in 10 years shades no one until 30 years from now. Notice that. Pillar 4 is called the skill stack. For a long time I believed you needed one big talent to get ahead, some rare gift the world would notice and reward. I do not have one big talent, almost nobody does. What changed things was learning to stack smaller, ordinary skills on top of each other until combined they became rare. Let me tell you about a fourth person, a draftsman in a mid-sized engineering firm outside Pittsburgh. On his own, his drafting skill was replaceable. But over 15 years, he also taught himself basic contract law, learned how to estimate project costs, and became fluent enough in client communication that he was eventually the only person in the building who could sit in a room with an engineer, a lawyer, and a client, and translate between all three. That combination, not any single skill inside it, was what made him valuable enough to negotiate his way into a partnership stake before he retired in his 50s. Here is the math behind skill stacking. If you are only in the top 25% at one skill, you are 1 in 4 people. But if you combine that with a second skill where you are also in the top 25% and those 2 skills are not commonly found together, you are now roughly 1 in 16 people. Add a third and you are closer to 1 in 60. You do not need to be a genius at one thing. You need to be good at a few things that rarely live in the same person. A river alone carves nothing fast. 3 rivers meeting at once carve a canyon in a fraction of the time. Pillar 5 is called the lifestyle freeze. This is the pillar that costs people the most quietly over decades, and almost nobody notices it happening because it feels like nothing more than living a little better. I have made this mistake myself. Every time my income rose, I let my spending rise right along with it, and I called it enjoying the fruits of my labor. Let me tell you about the barber I mentioned earlier, the stoic craftsman who ran a single shop in a small Georgia town for over 30 years. His income grew steadily as his reputation grew, but his lifestyle did not move an inch. Same house. Same truck replaced only when it truly wore out. He froze his lifestyle at a modest, comfortable level in his 30s and simply let every dollar of growth above that freeze point go straight into savings and modest real estate. He retired in his mid-50s owning 3 small rental properties outright, with no debt anywhere in his life. Here is the math. If your income grows by 5% a year but your spending also grows by 5% a year, your gap never widens, no matter how much you eventually earn. But if you freeze your lifestyle and your income still grows by 5% a year, your savings rate can double or triple within a decade, without you ever feeling like you are sacrificing anything because you already adjusted to the lower number years ago. A dam does not stop the river. It simply decides where the water is allowed to go. Notice that. Pillar 6 is called the quiet network. For most of my life, I believed that networking meant collecting business cards at events I did not enjoy. That is not what built any of the lives we have talked about tonight. Let me tell you about the anonymous saver one more time, the janitor from Ohio. Over decades, he built quiet, genuine relationships with a handful of people, a co-worker who eventually became a financial advisor, a nephew who worked at a bank, a neighbor who invested in local property. He was never chasing anyone for anything. He was simply present, reliable, and kind over and over for years. And that quiet consistency became the actual network that occasionally handed him better information, better opportunities, and better advice than any stranger ever could. Here is the math on why quiet networks outperform loud ones. A person with 5 deeply trusted relationships who each occasionally share one high-quality piece of information a year receives about 5 strong opportunities annually. A person with 500 shallow contacts who mostly ignore each other might technically know more people, but the actual useful signal reaching them is often close to zero, buried under noise. Depth beats width almost every single time. A single deep well can supply a whole village for a lifetime. 100 shallow puddles dry up by noon. If you're still with me at this point, you have already learned something most people never learn, which is that the gap between what you earn and what you keep is the actual engine of every story we have talked about tonight, not the size of the paycheck itself. If you are still with me, you have also just learned that the years you feel are wasted, stocking shelves, working a night shift learning. Ngia trades slowly are very often the exact years compounding is working hardest in the background, whether you can see it yet or not. And if you are still with me, you have learned that the moment your income grows, that is precisely the moment your old lifestyle is trying hardest to grow with it. And the freeze is the only thing that keeps the gap from closing right back up on you. Here is the great paradox sitting underneath all 6 pillars. Every single one of them is simple enough to write on the back of a napkin. Spend less than you earn, do more than you are paid for, start now instead of later. Stack small skills, freeze your lifestyle when income rises, build a few deep relationships instead of many shallow ones. A 10-year-old could understand every sentence in that list. And yet, by every honest estimate of how people actually behave with their money and their habits, fewer than 1 in 50 people who hear this will actually go home and do it. Not because it is complicated, because it is uncomfortable, and discomfort is the one thing the public set of rules never trained you to sit with. Jim Rohn spent decades saying that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Nobody ever said the bridge would be pleasant to walk across. It is simply the only bridge that leads anywhere real. So here is what I am asking you to do, and I am asking, not demanding, because nobody can make this decision for you. Get a piece of paper. An actual physical piece of paper, not a note on your phone that will get buried under 100 other notifications by tomorrow morning. Get a pen. Go find a mirror, because you are about to make a promise to the one person who has to live with whether you keep it. Write down 3 commitments. Not 10, not 1, 3. Something you will start doing about your gap, something you will start doing about your effort, and something you will start doing about your lifestyle. Sign your name under it, date it. Give yourself exactly 30 days, no more, no less, because 30 days is long enough to prove to yourself that you meant it, and short enough that you cannot talk yourself into waiting for some better moment that was never coming anyway. This is your 30-day contract, and it only works if you actually sign it. Now let me be honest with you, because honesty is the only thing I have to offer you that is worth anything. 98 of you watching this will nod along right now, feel something shift in your chest, and then go on with your evening exactly as before. 2 of you will actually pick up the pen. I do not know which one of you is yet. Neither do you, not really, not until the paper is in front of you. But the 6 pillars do not care which group you belong to. They will work exactly the same, quietly in the background, for whichever 2 out of every 100 people actually use them. The room you are sitting in right now, whatever it looks like, already contains everything you need to begin. You do not need a new job to start closing the gap this week. You do not need permission to start doing more than you are asked tomorrow morning. You do not need to wait for a better decade to start the compounding one. Jim Rohn used to remind people that we are all working on two things at once, whether we admit it or not, our fortune and our philosophy, and the philosophy almost always arrives first. Change how you see the six pillars tonight, and the fortune, slow as it may feel at first, has a way of following behind it, one quiet decade at a time. If any part of tonight's six pillars felt like it was aimed directly at you, there is a reason for that. And there is a second video waiting that goes deeper into the one pillar most people get wrong first, the one that quietly undoes all the others before they even get started. We will talk about that one next.